You want to know how fast life can change? Try coming home to find your family's legacy flattened and your name bulldozed into the dirt. That's how it started for me. One minute I was thinking I'd finally put some roots down, maybe breathe a little easier after years in the forestry service. And the next, I'm standing on a patch of splinters and scorched earth staring at a sign that tells me my own land's been claimed by the same HOA that polices people's grass height and mailbox color. You know what I mean? It hits you in the gut like your whole childhood just got tossed in a dumpster. The war for my grandfather's cabin started on a morning I should have been making plans, not finding ruins. I rolled out there with Travis, my contractor, old school square jaw hands built like bricks, thinking we'd check the foundation, swap stories, maybe knock out a few repairs. Instead, we hit the property line and see those damn HOA flags everywhere fluttering like they just planted a flag on the moon. Fresh gravel fancy posts with gold logos. It looked less like a forest and more like someone's idea of a resort. Only there's no resort. Just empty space where the cabin had been a cracked stone foundation and a dumpster full of everything my grandfather ever built. I don't remember crossing the clearing just yelling at some foreman who looked at me like I was trespassing on my own memories. When I asked who gave permission, he shrugged, said HOA said it was abandoned property. Abandoned. I'd been paying taxes for years, had the deed, the maps, even my granddad's old survey lines. I pulled them out like a badge, dared anyone to call my bluff. The foreman backed off, but the damage was done. Sheriff Colton showed up, a man who looked like every small-town sheriff you've ever met, all mustache and skepticism. And he took one look at my paperwork, shook his head, and said the words that stuck with me. They're going to have a hell of a time explaining this one. But an explanation doesn't rebuild what you lost. So I stormed into the HOA office at sunrise, running on nothing but coffee and a solid hate for beige carpets. The receptionist tried to sell me a smile, but Karen Mulroy, the president, all-power suit and ice-cold composure, came out herself. She tried to play dumb act like she didn't know which property I was talking about. That parcel, she said, tilting her head like a cat who just found a dead mouse. Our master plan shows it as green space. I tossed my paperwork on her desk. This is my land. My taxes, my deed, my family's sweat. She barely looked at it. Well, I'm not a legal expert. If you believe there's been a mistake, contact our attorney. She was betting I'd get tired, get buried in red tape, maybe just let it go. Yeah, that happened, but she didn't know me. I called my lawyer Mason Fleming that night. Old family friend, all denim and gravel, voice sharp as a tack. We spread every document out on my table, deed plat maps, tax receipts. Mason caught the trick right away. The county's records showed my land had been transferred 4 months ago with a digital signature that looked nothing like mine. Worse, it had been filed late on a Friday night by a guy named Colebrook, someone with a reputation for making things disappear in the records. Mason brought in a retired FBI analyst, and in 5 minutes we had proof, poor forgery, digital fingerprints, no paper trail, no notary. It wasn't just my land, it was my identity stolen and penciled out of existence. So we did what you have to do. We took it to the county clerk's office. The supervisor's face went pale when I dropped the forensic report and handed over my ID. Turns out I wasn't the only one. There was no original deed transfer, no scanned document, just a file uploaded from inside the system. Someone made this up from inside, the clerk said. And Colebrook, he'd already left under investigation. Translation. The whole thing smelled like a setup. They issued a freeze on construction pending investigation, and I walked out thinking maybe I'd finally get to breathe. But the HOA didn't care about freeze orders. When I got back to the property, crews were digging trenches, pouring concrete, pounding stakes where my porch used to be. I confronted the foreman again, and this time he pulled out a sheet signed by Karen herself. HOA approved. I took photos, called the inspector, and the next morning Travis called his trailer and all his tools torched in the middle of the night. Fire report said undetermined origin, which is just cop talk for we'll never catch the guy. Oh, and someone slashed my tire for good measure. You see a pattern here. They wanted me tired, wanted me scared, wanted me gone. But intimidation only works on people with something left to lose, and I had nothing but rage. Mason and I filed for an emergency injunction, got a restraining order signed by a county judge, and I laminated a copy to slap in the face of every worker on that site. By the time I handed it to the foreman, Karen was there herself. Sunglasses on, arms crossed like a queen at a coronation. "You're trespassing on a designated project site," she said. "No, Karen, you're trespassing on my land." She tried to play tough, but the law was on my side now, and I wasn't backing down. That night I parked my truck on the edge of the woods, set up trail cams, and tried to catch my breath. Didn't last. Next morning the sheriff called my truck had been trashed, windows smashed, sugar in the gas tank. The only footage I got was a hooded figure moving with all the cockiness of someone who thought they were untouchable. Then Travis called. His fire report was in likely accelerant, not enough for criminal referral. Nobody saw a thing, nobody heard a thing, and the HOA just kept building, acting like nothing had happened. So I did what you do when nobody listens: you make noise. I posted everything online. Photos of my granddad, the wreckage, the deed, the stop work order, the smug sign calling my land a community pavilion. By lunchtime, the story had spread like wildfire. Veterans groups, landowners, local teachers all chiming in about HOAs running amok. News crews wanted interviews. A drone pilot wanted to film the site. My inbox blew up, some with help, some with horror stories. One email from an old surveyor named Greg dropped a bomb. He'd been asked years ago to gray out property lines on HOA maps to push projects through faster. I sent that straight to Mason. And then the twist district prosecutor, Sandra Albright, called. "No nonsense, hard eyes, third-generation Carolinian. We're treating this as suspected property fraud and destruction of private assets," she said, "and we're going after them hard." She already had evidence forged, digital signatures, off hours, access logs, complaints from other counties about the same HOA legal firm. She wanted it all, and she wanted it fast. But Karen didn't fold. She tried to buy me off $250,000 and a new lot in exchange for silence and a signature that would have given up my rights and muzzled me for good. The agreement was a legal grenade, admitting their ownership, waiving damages, banning me from ever speaking about what happened. I played along, recorded the whole thing, and handed it over to the prosecutor. Within 72 hours, Karen's assets were frozen, the HOA headquarters raided, and a leak to the press blew it all open. Emails showing the plan was never an accident, never a misunderstanding. It was a blueprint for land theft. The county pulled every land transfer linked to the HOA reopening cases going back a decade. More victims came forward. More stories about land reclassified without notice, deeds transferred in the dark green spaces created out of other people's property. Karen was arrested, pink bathrobe hair a mess, trying to hide her face behind sunglasses. Her lawyer turned himself in the same day, hoping for a deal. Public outrage lit up like a brush fire. Petitions, emergency legislation, the whole works. And finally, victory. The judge ordered a full stop on all work restoration of my land and a full audit of HOA assets. I stood on that clearing, not angry, not even satisfied, just tired, but finally able to breathe. Volunteers showed up, strangers with tape measures and carpenter's pencils wanting to help rebuild. 6 months later, the cabin stood again, every beam and nail a piece of stubborn hope. Mason smiled when the court awarded me $1.6 million, enough to fix what could be fixed and maybe rest a little easier. But you know what? The money wasn't the point. Some things you just don't sell out, not for cash, not for convenience. Some things you fight for even if you're outnumbered and outgunned. Karen pled out, took her sentence, and the HOA dissolved assets, seized a whole community. Finally free to make their own decisions without fear of fines or bullies and blazers. Sometimes justice moves slow, sometimes it needs a little gasoline and a match to catch fire. But in the end, legacy is what you make of it. My grandfather's cabin stands the sign over the door reads, "Still standing," and I make a point to walk that old path just to remind myself and anyone watching nature reclaims what's hers, and so do I. Now here's the thing. What would you have done when the people in charge cross the line? When rules become a weapon? Does standing up for yourself mean starting a war? Or is it just refusing to disappear? Drop a comment. Share your own stories. Let's talk about what's really right, what's wrong, and whether fighting for a little patch of earth is worth all the scars it leaves behind. Because yeah, sometimes it is.